Says the Gemara, we are on 42a1 Mem Beis Amud Aleph. May tashmisho shel nachtom, right? So we are up to the water used by the baker. This is the water that the baker dips his or her hands into constantly to wet their hands before they engage in baking. And the Gemara says it should be poured out. Tanachada, we had one brayso that says shofchim b'makom midron. Then when you pour out this water, you have to pour it out in an inclined place. In other words, don't pour it out in a flat place, pour it out in an inclined place. Okay, ve'ein shofchim b'mkom mashborin, and you should not pour it out in an uneven place. Okay, in a place where there is broken ground, where it's going to collect. And then you have another brayso which says, no, you're allowed to pour it out in a place where the ground is broken. It's not a problem. The Gemara says, so we have a contradiction. One says it has to be poured out in an incline, and it cannot be poured out in a place where the ground is cracked. Okay, and the other one says you're allowed to do so. Lokasha, no, there's no contradiction. Hunt nefishi, where the water is abundant to kavu, it's going to collect and it's not going to evaporate, and you're going to have water there that's mixed with flour. That's a problem. Hadla nefishi, where are you allowed to pour it out even into a flat and cracked place? De lokavu, where it's so small, therefore it's not going to collect, meaning even if a little bit of it collects, it's so insignificant it's going to dry out. It's not going to be a problem. Now there's a big discussion among the Rishonim. What water are we talking about? Are we talking about, where are we talking about? Are we talking about in your own property? Right? Or are we talking about even in the public property? I mean, normally we say you're allowed to just put things into the public property if you're mafker them, and that's not a problem. There are Rishonim who point out that even that is not ideal. You should not be putting things into the public property, right? We don't go ahead, Erev Pesach, and just put our stuff in public property. We want to go ahead and make sure that there's no chametz even remaining, right? There's a big question sometimes where, I don't know, a person didn't around to burning the chametz, and they want to go ahead and they want to put their garbages out with chametz, right? If garbage day is whatever day, and they didn't get a chance to put all their garbage out, well, I'm just going to put it on the public property. So first of all, it's not a menschlich thing to do, to put your garbage on the streets. You should put it on your own property. That's the appropriate thing to do. But let's assume that's not a major issue. Let's get past that issue. It's not so simple simply to do that. First of all, even when you do that, there's another problem. What is that? Your garbage bin actually still belongs to you, and therefore putting it on the street doesn't even help. So what do some people do? They'll take the garbage bags and put in the street. That is really not menschlich, okay? But even still, the question is that okay? Based on what we're describing over here, putting an abundance of chametz somewhere where it's not going to evaporate, certainly when you put a garbage bag of chametz out there, really not so simple, right? So bottom line is it shouldn't be done. But we see there are certainly opinions that say even if I'm mafker, even if I say it's completely hefker, but I go ahead and I put chametz, which is not like a tiny minuscule, meaning if I go ahead before Pesach and I have finished my, like, let's say a year like this, Shabbos, and I finish eating like some challah, and I go and I take the crumbs, I put that in the public domain, both from a menschlich perspective, that's fine. You're allowed to put crumbs in the public domain, as well as it's so minuscule, it's going to blow away, that's not a problem. We're talking about putting a major amount into the public domain. Again, menschlich issue, that's not what the Gemara is dealing with, but then practically to put an abundance of chametz out there is highly problematic. Don't do it. Okay. Bottom line is you have to get rid of the chametz in a more sophisticated way. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda, Isha lo talush ela b'mayim shalanu. Okay, a woman should not knead dough for matzah only with water. Shalanu means from the word lan, which means slept. So what does that mean, water that sleeps? What in the world does that mean? What that means is that you draw the water and then you allow it to sit overnight, and in doing so, it cools it off, right? Back nowadays, okay, you want cold water, you go to the cold tap as opposed to the hot tap. Back then, you drew water, and then the question was, is it going to be hot, is it going to be cold? And so you want to leave it out, and therefore it would cool it off. And so shalanu, you leave it overnight and it cools it off. It doesn't actually need to be overnight. It needs to wait 12 hours to cool it off. Again, this would not necessarily apply nowadays because we could just get cold water or cool our water if we wanted to, put some ice in it. But back in the day, to ensure that the water is cooled off, that's what they would do. However, as I think many of you just heard when it said shalanu, what did you think? Like our water, right? So let's see. There's a funny, interesting story. Drasha Ramasna bePapunya. Ramasna got up and taught. He gave a class in Papunya a little bit before Pesach, and he said this thing: water should be kneaded with the dough from the water that's shalanu. So lemasar aitu kule alma chazbayu. The next day, they all came to Ramasna with their pitchers, and they said, "Okay, you should only do our shalanu." Also means our water. They said, "Oh, we want our water. Give us your water. Give us your water." Give us water. I said water that slept. I didn't mean shalanu, our water, and then water that slept overnight. Now, some say the Gemara is not just teaching us a cute story, how people misunderstood him, but actually is teaching us that. So what do they do in that case? What do they do? They're planning on making their matzah that day. They come forward and they say, "Oh, give us your water." And he's like, "What are you talking about? You my guys completely misunderstood me." So what do? Practically, that means that they used regular water that day because they couldn't wait overnight. So what we learned from this Gemara is that actually b'di'evet, push comes to shove, you could use water that did not rest overnight. So it's not just just a cute story of people misunderstanding him. Okay, 42a2. Darash Rava. Ish lo talosh b'chama. A woman should not knead the dough in the sun because the sun might heat up the dough. V'lo b'chame chama, nor with water heated up by the sun, because again, you don't want the water to be hot. V'lo b'mayma grufa min ha-mulyar, nor the water drained from the bottom of the mulyar. Mulyar was like a hanging pot, very thick hanging pots that they use as like kind of like an urn that they hung over their fire. Okay, so basically, you imagine where they cooked, and then over it they had this very thick pot that was filled with water. And even after it cools off, there's still a concern that it's hot because it was very thick metal, and it was like kind of like a thermos. It would basically maintain the temperature, and therefore you don't want to bring water from there because again it might be too hot. And she should not raise her hand from the oven. What that means is she shouldn't stop moving her hands. You should never stop like dealing with the dough until the whole bread is done. In other words, when you're making matzah, you don't stop. You don't stop moving, or you don't stop like kneading and pushing and all that, because the second you do, there's a concern it's going to rise. As long as there's movements, it's being held down. It's being prevented from rising. V'tzarch shnei kelim, and two vessels are needed. Echad shemikatefes bo, one which she bastes the dough. If you want to baste your matzah with water, you use one bowl for that. V'achad shematzenenes bo siyadeha, and one in which she cools your hands off, right? Because the cooling of the hands, if you're using the dough a lot, meaning if you use your hands a lot, your hands become warm. And the concern is, if I'm going to be using the same bowl for water that I'm using to knead the dough, my hand starts, with all the blood circulation, etc., starts to get hot. And then I use that, and I keep on cooling off my hands there. That means I'm warming up the water at the same time. But then I'm going to use that water to baste the dough. There's a concern that water maybe got too warm. Okay. Ibailuhu. Avra v'lasha mahu. Let's say she did knead the dough in warm water. What's the halacha? Okay, now we're not talking about, whether it has to be overnight or not. But here we're saying, what's the scenario if it's actually warm water? Mazutra amar mutter, of ashi amar aser. Okay, we have machlokas whether it's permitted or not. And now they're each going to support their position. Amar mazutra mina minala. Where do I know this from? That it is permitted. The tiny son and brisa in lostanas or Pesach. You're not allowed to soak barley grains in water on Pesach. Well, we saw this earlier. Vimlasas. But if you did soak barley grains in bakwasturum, then you check if the grains split. They're forbidden. Lonis baku whicharim. But if they did not split, they're permitted. So you see from there, you're not supposed to do something, i.e. soaking barley. And if you did, and then you check, did it become problematic or not? So he wants to say the same thing over here. You're not allowed to use warm water, but you check, did it become chametz or did not become chametz? Ravashi Amar Atu Kulu Chad Mechisa Machisino. Do you want to weave all the brises together? He said, what in the world are you doing? That's talking about barley, right? Barley is one thing. Who says the same principle applies to all types of things? Every time it says usher, it means usher, then you check, and if it didn't happen, if it didn't become chametz and it's permitted, whoa, slow down. It said that by barley, apply that to barley. Who says the same things over here? And therefore he says no. Leave that alone, right? Where it was specified in a brisa that you could check and say, therefore it's permitted, it's permitted. And in a place where it was not stated, it was not stated. And therefore over here, since we don't have a qualifier saying that, if it gets, you could check after using warm water, just check if it became chametz or not. There's no such qualifier. It doesn't say that anywhere. Therefore, you're not allowed to go ahead and use such matzah, and therefore you could, that such matzah that was used, such matzah which was made with dough, with water that was warm, is usher, and you cannot use such matzah. Hadron Lachal Shah, we just finished the second parak. Mazel tov, we are now going to begin the third parak. Shkayak, well done. And we finished a book. We finished a book of, maybe that's even more exciting for us. We finished one of the books of Pesachim, where there's three books? 4? I think there's 3. I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, whatever. It's all good. We finished 2. Okay, well done. 2 chapters, 1 book. Mazel tov. 1 second. Here we go. Okay, let's begin a new Mishnah. Okay, so we're going to start talking about, this is going to be a very relevant topic to some people. Cosmetics cosmetics on, okay. You should have sponsored this one. Okay. Okay. well done. Okay. So let's see. This event is sponsored by. Okay. Tana Rabbanan. We have a brayso that says Shlosha Dvarim. No, that's the Gemara. Let's start the Mishnah. Excuse me. 1 second. Here's the Mishnah. Mishnah says like this. Ve'elu ovrim. These are things which you are going to be in transgression of bal yira or bal yamatzeh, right? There are 2 transgressions. Whenever you have chametz, there are 2 transgressions that you are over on. Not eating, just owning. 2 transgressions for bal yira, you shouldn't be seen, bal yamatzeh shouldn't be found. Those are 2 prohibitions, okay? So what are ve'elu ovrim b'Pesach? These are things which you are over on Pesach. One is kutach habavli. We spoke about this many times. It is a dip that was made in Bavel. Apparently, Rabbi, what's his name? Stefanski made it based on the ingredients over here. Apparently, it's not very tasty. But basically, this was a very popular dip. We'll see the Gemara is not a fan of it either. We'll see soon. Fine. V'shecher hamadi, median beer, okay. V'chometz hadomi, and vinegar from Edomite vinegar. V'zeisom hamitzri, and this is a medicinal drink that was made in Egypt, okay. Those are all things that you have a mixture. It's not chametz, it's not like bread, but you have grains mixed into it. And we'll see what the exact ingredients are, etc. soon. Okay, v'zoman shel tabaim, similarly, and these are things which the chametz never really develops in it properly, as we'll see. Meaning, there's going to be a mixture of chametz, but it's called chametz nuksha. It's like literally like beaten chametz. It's not like it doesn't develop. The chametz doesn't develop properly. Zoman shel tabaim. This is water, which they used to put bran in it, and it was used to dye skin, like hides. Vamilan shel tabachim. This was a bread, which was it was like a type of bread which was made from grain which wasn't fully developed. The grain itself was not fully developed, and they used it to like on top of a dish in order to draw out like all the literally it's called a zuama. Basically, like they used to put it like the bakers, the cooks used to put it on top of the dishes, and it would draw out like all the the bad oils or whatever it was, and then they'd scoop it all up and take it off. Okay, fine. The kolan shel sofrim. This was a glue that was used for scribes. Okay, which they put chametz. Right. Sometimes you have this nowadays. You have some glues. Flour could be a binding agent, and therefore you could have a glue which might have that. Rabbi Eliezer Omer aftach shitei nashim. Rabbi Eliezer says you're also not allowed to have any. What's it called? Cosmetics. Any cosmetics of women. Okay, and now the Gemara is gonna define that. Like we're gonna get into more detail. What does it mean? Any cosmetics? What's included? What's not included? Fine, we'll see. Is that a klal? Kol shehu b'min dagan. The Mishnah concludes anything which is made of grain. Okay, harei over b'Pesach. You are in transgression, meaning anything which has any of the 5 grains, you're going to be over on Pesach from those 2 prohibitions by Yerah, by Matzah. Hari elu ba'azhara. These grains are things, meaning when it's a mixture of chametz, or it's chametz which didn't really fully develop, but it's still partial chametz, you are in violation of, there's a violation, there's a negative prohibition that you cannot eat them. But if you did, ein behem shum kares. There is no kares for eating this, because it's not only like if you eat bread on Pesach, that's when it's kares, but you eat something which is a mixture of grain mixed in, like this kutach or whatever, there is no kares for doing so. Okay, either way, it is aser. Okay, so then the Gemara is going to go on some quick discussions and about what's good foods. Let's see. Tana Rabbanan. We have a brayso. Shlosh dvarim ne'amarim bekutach habavli. There are 3 things said about kutach habavli. Okay, what are those? Mitamte mesalev. They ruin your heart. Okay, eating kutach habavli is not good for your heart. Meaning what that means is that good for your thoughts. Like it ruins your ability to think straight. Umisame esainaim, and it blinds a person. Umachish guf, and it weakens a person. Okay, why is that? Mitamte mesalev. It causes a person not to be so smart, to be shum nisyove dechalva, because it has whey. Whey apparently is not good for your brain. Okay, let's keep on reading. It blinds mishum milcha, because it has sodomite salt mixed in. Okay, machish leguf, it weakens the body mishum komnisa deuma, because it has like spoiled bread in it. Now keep in mind, we've spoken on this a number of times, and that is that according to most commentators, I shouldn't say most commentators, according to some commentators, whenever the Gemara has like a medicinal health advice, you have to keep in mind they're using they're turning to the doctors of the time and incorporating that into the Gemara. In other words, halacha is there. This is where Rav Hirsch says this. It sounds a little heretical. Rav Hirsch says, the Chachamim's specialty is Torah. Torah, they're undisputed masters of. We are dust to their feet. When it comes to medicinal, but they went ahead and they wanted to, for the sake we have a principle, an imperative to be healthy, and therefore included in the Gemaras, included in all these discussions about halacha, they incorporated medical advice so that we'd be healthy people, because being healthy is very important. However, when it comes to medical advice, as opposed to any halachic advice, they incorporated the medicine of the time, and therefore, again, I don't think anyone's eating kutach habavli, but we'll see another example in a moment of something which sounds like, yes, no. Bottom line is any medical advice, Rav Hirsch says, that's not halacha. The halacha is be healthy. But in terms of the details, that you have to recognize that they took the medical advice at the time. Again, not everyone agrees. Some take great issue with this, but that's, I think, a simple approach. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. We have a brayso that says, Shlosh dvarim, marbin azevel, 3 things increase a person's waist, physical waste. V'chofen esakoma, and they cause a person to, literally their stature to shrink, but basically to become weakened. V'nodlin echan mechamesh meos b'ma'arinav, and cause a person to lose 1/500th of their sight. Shel adam of a person. Ve'elohein, what are they? Pas kibar, coarse flour, v'sheicher chadash, new beer, v'yar chai, and vegetables. Rashi says not just vegetables, but eating a lot of fresh vegetables, many vegetables. We know that certainly causes bowel, it's something which does that, but all the other things, okay, maybe yes, maybe no. But that is the medicinal advice of the time. Taner about another brayso, shlosh dvarim mematinas devil. Three things decrease a person's waist, v'zokven esakoma, and cause a person to have strength, umeir nisnaim, and give a person greater sight. Ve'elohen pas nekia, bread made of like clean flour, basar, shamein, fatty meat, v'yan shemen, yashan, and old wine. Okay, the Gemara elaborates on these things. Pas nekia, when we say clean bread, dismida, it means it's made from fine flour. Ubasar shamein, fatty meat. Ditzfirta dlo ipsach, it's referring to goats which never gave birth, meaning a goat that was never a mother. The yayin yashan, old wine. Atik atike, which means it's 3 years old. Okay, kol mili demali lahai. When it comes to health, there are many things which are healthy for one of their limbs, kash lahai, but it's bad for another limb. Uda kash lahai, mal lahai, and it might be bad for one limb, right? Pointing out that there's very few things in the world which are absolute, right? Most things, you're gonna have something which might be good for your hearts, it's bad for your liver. Good for your liver, bad for your hearts, okay? And he says, chutz bar, with exception, with three things. Three things are across the board healthy. Mizang vila retiva, okay, moist ginger. Okay, so eat that sushi ginger that everyone throws out, right? Good for you. Upilpale richta, long pepper. Upas nikia, and bread made with fine flour. Basar shamein, and fatty meat. V'yan yashan, and the 3-year-old wine. Demal likuli gufay. Those are good across the board. Okay, fine. We're gonna pick up, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.